Greetings, beloved Star Child Rising. You are in Christina's Corner, and I am Christina. Welcome back to the podcast, where I have the opportunity and the honor to highlight and celebrate individuals who are out here leveraging their talents to make a positive impact on the world. And today we're celebrating the dedication and impact of a truly remarkable educator, Kathy Brown Crowe. For over 25 years, Kathy has been a cornerstone of a large public middle school in Maryland, shaping the lives of countless students with her passion for history and her unwavering commitment to inclusive education. Known for her stability, her patience, her knowledge, her creativity, her deep connection for her students, and her sense of humor. Kathy has built a reputation as a teacher who not only imparts knowledge, but also fosters respect and understanding. A Civil War enthusiast, marching band lover, you thought I forgot Kathy, and devoted family traveler, Kathy brings a rich tapestry of experiences to her classroom. Please join me in welcoming an extraordinary human being, and I have the honor of calling her my friend, Kathy Brown Crowe. Welcome, Kathy.
Thank you very much. I greatly appreciate the invitation.
So glad you're here. I miss you so much, um, but I'm glad we have the opportunity to connect here.
I
Be,
do as well. I miss hanging out and having our conversations.
yeah, and our dinners and
Mhm.
desserts. We won't forget
Yes,
dessert.
always dessert.
Well, Kathy, so on the podcast, I always ask six questions, and I try to keep them to six as much as I can. But the first question always asks you to go back to the beginning. What were you like as a child? What was your upbringing like? And were there any clues that may have come up to make you think that you might want to be an educator? Um, and how did you move from, you went to a small private college to such a huge middle school for your first teaching experience. So take us back to the beginning when you were a little girl, how that was, and then how you made the move to the large public middle school.
I grew up in what my sister and I commonly refer to as the Kool-Aid house, because the door was always open. All the kids used to hang out at our house. We didn't ever actually have Kool-Aid because my mother was not a, she didn't believe that Kool-Aid was a good thing to drink. But you could always come to my parents' house. Door was always open. Even after my sister and I left, we had friends that would stop by and see our parents. And that's how I was raised, and that's how I then went out into the world. Is the door should be open. People are welcome, and there were no contingencies with that. There was no restrictions. Um, Although we did have some friends that we weren't allowed to invite to dinner at the same time because of how much they ate. But other than that, there were no restrictions on who could be there. And that was a real marker for me, um, growing up. Getting into the education, I was actually very shy growing up as a child.
Really?
I was painfully shy. So the fact that I actually stand up in front of large groups of people and speak is shocking to some of the people that knew me as a child, because I was not comfortable in any way, shape, or form doing that. But I started working at the in the nursery at our church, and I started working with younger kids, and that's kind of how I fell into it. And then the history aspect of, I love to teach history. That came in from my grandfather. My grandfather was on my dad's side was very into history. He actually fought in World War One, and he never talked about World War One, but he just would share his love of history. And my dad fell into that. So, and if you look at the photo albums from when I was growing up, you see my sister and I, and you can tell it's different years because we get taller, but we're always like the quintessential picture of us on either side of the cannon with the flags, because every battlefield has that. We saw a lot of those. I've now dragged both of my children to all of those as well. But that was part of growing up, was the history and aspect. And I know a lot of my own personal history that way as well. When I was in elementary school, we had to do a family tree project for a class in elementary school. I don't remember. I think it was fourth grade. And most people came in with themselves and then their parents and then their grandparents. And I came in with the scroll that went back to the 1600s because my dad's parents had everything mapped out. And so I knew all of that. I knew all of the different parts of that history, which is very cool and got me into history. And then I went to high school and I had a history teacher that I really clicked with that reinforced that. Then I went to college in West Virginia, which, yeah, is a very small school. My high school graduating class and my college graduating class were the same size. And I ended up at the large middle school because when I first graduated from college, I had a degree in elementary education, and I graduated in the early 90s, and nobody was hiring. Like, the only place you could get an elementary position was in the inner city in like Dade County, Florida. I lived in Pennsylvania. I did not have I did no interest in moving to Florida. Yeah, you couldn't, there just weren't positions open anywhere in the areas around where I lived. And my family's very close, so I didn't want to move far, far away. So I got into working in daycare and did that for a while. And then I went back and got my master's degree in special ed. And when I graduated at the end of the 90s with my degree in special ed, I went and the middle school that I work at was the first interview that I had. And it came after the weekend that I was graduating from college. The Tuesday or Wednesday before I was supposed to graduate, my grandmother passed away. And my parents insisted that I still walk for graduation for my master's degree. So they postponed her funeral and till the beginning of the next week. And I literally left. I left graduation, drove home. We had all of her services. And then I turned around and I drove back the next day and I had the interview. And it was an interesting position because I was teaching social studies, but I was also case managing special ed. And it was an interesting combination for me. I was excited about being able to teach the history as well as do the job that I had trained for. I did that for the first 2 years. It was very difficult because it really was 2 full-time jobs. And I had very little free time.
I remember. I'm so glad for those who are watching, that large middle school is where Kathy and I met, and I'm so glad you came, and I felt like we were destined to meet and become friends and lifelong friends as we are.
Yeah, you
Because I
were one
learned
of the
so much.
reasons I survived. Those
Thank
first
you.
2 years.
You too. You too. I think we leaned on each other. But we were, really good at what we did, both of us. And while you were talking, it made me think about, I wonder if this happens for other educators as well. You know that you wanted to get into history, not only because the family connection, but because you had a history teacher that you connected with. And I wanted to teach math because I had a couple of really good math teachers that I connected with. And I wonder if there's a correlation between that.
I think 100% there is, because I don't know any teacher that I have worked with who hasn't at one point in time said, yeah, this teacher is the one that I like model myself after, or I
Mm,
took a lot of their ideas because I loved being a student in their class.
yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah. Well,
But we
thanks
all
for
have
sharing.
them.
We're off to a great start. Let's go to number two. Um, as a teacher who specializes in working with students of varied abilities, you talked about this, including neurodivergent learners, you're adept at making adjustments for equitable access to the curriculum. And when you reflect on your career, have you noticed any trends with the Gen Z population? And if so, how has this impacted your teaching pedagogy?
Most definitely, there are changes. I mean, there's changes throughout history, both with the education system as well
Mm-hmm.
as with the students that come into the system. And in a perfect world, the system adapts to the students. Um,
In a,
we don't always have a perfect world, and a lot
mm-hmm.
of times the system expects the students to adapt to the system, and that's not what's best for students. Um, some of the things that I have noticed, changes, I should say, in the kids that are coming in, um, attention spans, the phone, the
Mm-hmm.
smartphone is has definitely caused a lot of attentional issues, because they're addicted to their smartphones. I mean, like it's taken. We have new policies for phones in our building, and it's an improvement, but it's still an issue. They can't really go through a class period without having to check their phones. I actually had a student this year. Um, Now, I'm not on Instagram, or maybe it's Twitter. I don't. He was talking about having some sort of streak. And again, I'm old enough to not know exactly what he was talking about. And he's like, "But Miss Crowe, it's really important that I keep up my." And he was so focused on keeping up the streak on his social media that he was missing what was going on in class. And that's something but I see it with parents too.
Yeah.
I mean, I see it when I go out to a restaurant and just other adults. They all have their phones on out, and they're
Mhm.
double checking their phones. And I will admit I do it too sometimes, but that is definitely a change, because when we started teaching, that wasn't an issue. I mean, we had other issues we had to keep their attention, but we weren't fighting for their attention from the phone. And that has definitely had an issue. That, and the fact that we are now one-to-one technology digital, which is also a change. I feel that paper and pencil is so important to learning.
Yeah, I definitely feel that way about math. Um,
Any
you know,
subject, any
yeah.
subject, if you write it down, it's so much, it gets into your brain so much better.
Hmm.
If you're interacting with the text, you're highlighting, you're annotating right where the words are. It helps you to comprehend, it helps you to analyze. But once you put it on a screen, it's so much easier for them to just click on a new tab. And there's a game that they can get to, or and they are so much more technologically advanced than some of the teachers are, because, or even some of our tech people, because they can get around our firewalls and,
Well,
they can get,
what about some of the positive things about technology? Like, one of the
there
things
are,
that I found is, if, the further that you get in math, the longer the problems are, and that you're putting all these problems on the board. And when we talk about equitable access, phones came in handy when someone wanted to just quickly take a picture, a
mhm,
snapshot of everything that was on the board. So you don't have to wait for them to, look at a couple numbers and then write it down and,
down and
go back
copy.
up
Yep.
and, what I'm saying? That,
Mhm.
and then recording sometimes, especially in a class where it's kind of like a lecture style, being able to listen and record to go back and, you know, what
Yeah.
about some of the positive aspects of the technology?
There are, especially for students that have different learning disabilities, speech to text and
Mm,
text to speech are some of the best things where they can listen to it and see it at the same time. It makes it easier for them to process it in the text to speech. For students that have dysgraphia, where they just writing is very difficult for them, and that process then blocks their ability to get their thoughts down coherently on a piece of paper if they're trying to
right,
write.
right.
But if they have speech to text, that takes away that block. So there are
Mhm.
definitely aspects of the technology that are beneficial. Um, I would have worked it a little bit differently than the school system did, but most definitely there are definite aspects that assist those students in being able to access the curriculum. And that is a key thing for special ed, is that access piece.
One of the things that I remember so clearly, and I don't think I'm asking you about this later, but one of the things I wanted to bring in because it just clicked my memory that I remember that you did that was very fun and engaging was like that Civil War project
I,
that you did. Do you still do that?
okay,
And are kids just as engaged with it as they used to be?
I don't do I actually am not working in eighth grade anymore, and eighth grade is where you
Oh,
have US
okay.
history. So I don't do the Civil War. It was a competition where I divided them in
Mm,
half, and they were actually working towards gaining points by doing
right.
different things they were supposed to do, like their homework and participating in class. They could earn points a variety of ways. I do other things that are kind of in that realm. When I moved into world history, we did the taught about the trans-Saharan trade routes. So I made that into a board game that
Oh,
they
okay.
that they that they play, where they have to. It's kind of a combination of Candyland and Monopoly, where you have to
Okay.
go through the different trade routes and collect different trade goods. But there are hazard squares, so you can land on a hazard square and a sandstorm may blow up and you lose a turn, or you land on a hazard square and thieves come and steal all of your trade goods and you have to go back to start all over again. Um, anything that the whole point of keeping kids focused, anytime that you can make it fun,
Right. Right.
a game, a we just did in the sixth grade, I work with a more of a self-contained group, and we were doing something with the Silk Road, and they had to the teacher had created basically. Do you remember Oregon Trail?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So it was more of a paper pencil version, but they would go to different stations and they could buy different trade goods. And then they had to figure out, based on the money that they spent, how much money that they made overall. But then there were things at the end. If you bought a certain trade good, then you survived. If you did something, if you missed or didn't buy a certain trade good, you may have died of a disease or something along the lines of the dysentery that Oregon Trail threw at you. But they found it really entertaining and it made the learning fun. And that's
Yeah.
so key with students is making the learning fun. I remember when you were teaching,
Mhm.
um, and I don't remember the full story, but it has to do with the Royals.
The
And it
royalty and the
was
bums, right? Yeah.
yes.
Right.
and and you would have the kids because math was never my strong suit, but you would teach the kids and then you would have the kids write down an explanation to Miss Crow because Miss Crow needs well, actually it wasn't Miss Crow at that time, but she needs help with this. And you had them explain it, write it out to me and explain to me how they were supposed to use this to solve the equations. And they made it fun.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And
And
the
that's
other
one of
one
the
that I
first
remember that
things that's, yeah, go ahead.
the
Yeah.
one thing, the other thing that you used to do that I absolutely remember was uh, April Fool's Day. Do you remember
Um,
coming in? No, you don't remember what you did?
no,
You
what did I
used to
do?
you used to come in as your cousin. You would pretend to be your cousin and you
Hmm.
would dress just a slight different than you would normally dress. And you pulled off the whole day being your cousin, Miss Gilmore's cousin, and the kids loved it. They thought they knew it was you, but you would not break character, and it
That
was
sounds
great.
just like I don't remember that.
You
But I
don't, I
know
do.
that I did so many crazy things because that's one of the first things you learn when you're in the middle school environment.
Yes.
You better goddamn have some fun in store for those
Uh-huh.
kids or you lose them. And once you lose them, it's
It's
really tough to get them back. So it's really
almost
important to
impossible.
take the time to gain their trust and have fun with them, be vulnerable with them,
Uh-huh.
laugh at yourself with them so they can feel comfortable in laughing at themselves. But
Very much.
it's hard to be a middle school teacher. It's hard to be a middle school teacher. And
It's hard
but
to be a
one,
middle school kid.
that's right. You're right. You're
Middle
right. You're too
school
old to
is,
do this and too young to do this. And so,
and the hormones are raging, and you're not sure exactly where you fit, and you're trying to figure that out. And people are asking you about what you want to do when you grow up, and you're like, "What do you mean grow up? I was
right.
just in elementary school. I'm not ready for that." It's hard.
Right.
I used to tell my own daughters because they would come home from middle school and it was rough. And of course, they were in middle school during the pandemic, which made it, especially for Anna, because
Yeah.
we shut down when she was in sixth grade and she spent most
Yeah.
of seventh grade virtual.
Hmm. And Miko, her
And
first year of high school, she was,
yeah,
you know,
that was
home.
that was Sarah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Sarah, the last quarter of the year, Sarah went back into the building
Mhm.
of that freshman
Yeah.
year. But yeah, and I would tell them, it's okay. Middle school
Mhm.
is the low point of education for everybody. It's the low point of
Right.
education. Elementary school is all about, it's fun, it's recess, it's all of those things. High school, you get all kinds of choices, and there's new things to try and all of that. And then there's middle school. And middle school is they're all required classes. Everybody has to take the same classes. And it's where people that were figuring out pecking order, and there's cliques, and that's the area when bullying is the biggest, has the biggest impact, is during middle school. It's the hardest time to be in school is during middle school as a
Mhm.
student.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they need teachers that get that.
Yeah.
Teachers that teach middle school that stay. Because I mean, there are those of us, I've been doing it for 26 years.
Mhm.
I have not moved back to elementary school when I could. I haven't decided to go on to high school. Don't really want to, because these are my people.
Mhm.
Um, and then we have middle school teachers that last 1, maybe 2 years, and they're like, "Oh, I can't
Mhm.
do this,"
Right. And that's
because
best. You know,
yeah,
if you're not built for it, that's best because,
hmm
you know, you've been doing it for 26 years. But also, Kathy, you showed up every day, which means the world
yeah,
to the kids. You were on time and showed up every day, every day, ready to go. And that means a lot
it
to
does.
students who aren't seeing that stability everywhere they turn. And so,
And that's another change that I'm seeing. There are more and more students that we see that are in an unstable environment. There's
mhm,
an increase in that.
yeah,
And school is their stability. School
mhm,
is their consistency. And we need to provide that, to be there all the
mhm.
time.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to number 3. A few years ago, I took a group of high school students on a civil rights tour of the South, and we visited Central High School in Little Rock, the home of the Little Rock Nine, and learned about the challenges surrounding the AP African American Studies course. Given the current push to eliminate DEI related content from curricula, how does this impact you as a history teacher or a lover of history, world history, whatever? How do you navigate some of these challenges? I know it's probably different with you being in Maryland, right?
It is. I'm very thankful that I'm in Maryland, because there's a buffer, if you will. uh, you can't teach history unless you include everybody, because it's not history unless you include everybody. And you need to include everybody's perspectives and their viewpoints and their experiences. And even if you don't understand their experiences, because they're not your experiences, that doesn't invalidate their experiences. And all of those pieces and parts make up what our history is. Some of them are positive things, some of them are very negative things, but just because they're negative doesn't mean that they should not be mentioned or brought. I mean, they happened.
Mhm.
You can't just make it go away. You learn from it. You learn from everything. Um, I I'm a big proponent of including. I when I first heard that they were getting rid of, in some places, the AP African American History or Studies, I was shocked,
Mhm.
because it's so important. It's it's integral into the history of the United States. You know, African Americans have been part of this country from day one. So you can't really teach the history without having that there. And I just, that, and I understand, I believe that the people that are really pushing to get rid of DEI don't understand what it is. They have no concept of what diversity, equity, and inclusion means and what it covers. Because it's not just history and including everybody's history. It's not, I mean, it's special ed. All of special ed is DEI. So anybody who has a learning disability and any accommodations, 504 plans, IEPs, all of that. It's the ramps that are and elevators that are included in buildings to allow people with physical handicaps to get in. You know, all those things that we do to make education accessible. And that really is what it is. When you include people's history in school, that is making education accessible. Because if they don't see themselves, they're not part of it. And that's exclusionary. And it's so important to be able to see themselves. Whether it's pictures on the walls for whatever month that happens to be Women's History Month, Hispanic History Month, or it's looking at a specific historic event from the perspectives of everybody that was involved. You know, you can't learn about the Trail of Tears if you do not have the perspective of the Native Americans. So, I mean, it's frustrating as a history teacher to have people want to not I don't know how to phrase it, so that they only want some history to be taught and their viewpoint of that history.
And
And that's frustrating.
you're speaking from your point of view as a history or world history teacher who has a love of history and a love for your country. Yet I have spoken to history teachers who are really for the um, the getting rid of the teaching of African American history, with saying something to the effect of, you know, to it may be harmful to kids to hear some of the horrific things that have taken place in this country. And so, what do you say to that? I don't want to say what I said. So, what do you say to that?
I'm going to edit. Hogwash is that's it's not harmful ever to learn the truth. I'm not quite sure what learning about the history of a country, how learning about the history of your country could be harmful. I mean, if you look at my viewpoint on that is basically you're choosing one group of people that you don't want to be harmed, and instead you're harming other groups of people in order to protect that one group of people that you want to protect. That is my viewpoint. It's it's exclusionary. I'm obviously a white person, and I understand that the people that feel that people will be harmed are people in my cultural group, if you will. But I've raised two children, and I have been very clear and detailed with my kids about the history of our country because they need to know. Because I'm trying to teach my children to be kind, compassionate, helpful individuals. I want them to look at someone else and see them as a person and not judge for any reason if they don't know the person. I want them to be open to everyone. They need to, hiding things is never a good way to go.
Yeah.
Lying about things isn't ever a good way to go. And if you choose to take those parts of history out, you're hiding things and you're lying because they happened. And yes, they were horrible. And yes, throughout history, it doesn't matter whether you're talking about the United States or you're talking about Europe or you're talking about Africa. Every country has parts of their history that are bad, that are where people did horrible things to other people.
And in 20 years, when these children learn the truth and
Mm-hmm.
reflect on the truth, you want to be able to look yourself in the mirror and say that you were honest
Mm-hmm.
and you shared the truth as an educator. That's what you're here to do, you know? And so, anyway, we'll leave that there because that could be a whole different podcast
Yes, it
interview
could.
talking
We
about
could
that.
spend an entire 2 hours on that
Yeah.
topic
And
alone.
you're in Maryland. I don't know if I could be a history teacher, um, and not be able to teach the truth, you know.
I
I would have to,
I know that I could not. I know that there are states in this country where I could not be a teacher.
yeah, yeah. Okay, let's go to number 4. We all have watershed moments that shape who we are. Can you share, Kathy, a moment or experience that significantly impacted your life and contributed to the person that you are today as a confident, kind, and caring woman, wife, mother, sister, colleague, teacher, and friend?
You're going to limit me to one. I
Or 2, we got time.
okay, because I can go with more than one. Excellent. So I'm going to start with, I mentioned that history teacher that really clicked for me in high school, and actually to the point where I had him in class when I was a sophomore. I deliberately picked the class that he was teaching as a junior and a senior so that I would continue in his classes.
Mm.
And senior year, we had half a semester or half a year of economics, a semester of economics, and then the other half was a choice. And he did a law class. And Mr. Psycho, yes, and that was his name, but it was spelled Siko, pronounced Psycho. Um, he walked in the first day of that law class. And keep in mind, this is the 1980s. He wrote his home phone number on the board
Mm.
and said, if you can't call your parents and you're in trouble, you call me.
Wow.
And that blew my mind because even back in the 80s, yeah, you didn't know your teachers really outside. I mean, like they didn't hang out with, yeah, there was that professional distance between you and your students. But he was there, he was putting himself out there. I mean, a lot of things could have happened with that, but nobody that I'm aware of ever used that number in a manner that he did not intend. And the fact that he was willing to, put himself in that position to say, hey, I'm an adult. I can help you if you need help. Outside of school, it's not got anything to do with school. But if you need help, I am there. And that blew me away. I mean, I'm over 50. We'll go with that. I'm over 50. I still remember that whole scenario. And I was 17. That was huge. And I will say that was a huge motivator for me to really get into education and be that teacher, because I wanted to be a person who other people could go to, kids could go to for help when they needed it. And I guess the second one, I'm going to go back to our original Green Giraffe team. Back in the day, as a newbie teacher who was coming in with a monstrous job on her shoulders, the four of us, actually five, because I got to include Pat in there too. The five, it just having the support of you and Deanne and Pat, just that was so helpful. And that was my first experience working in a team in that manner, where we all taught our own classes, but we had the same kids. So if you were having a problem with a kid in a class, there were four other adults that were like brainstorming ideas. How do we fix this? And I miss that part of middle school now because we don't have those teams anymore.
Oh, no? Okay.
No, we got too big, is what the reasoning they gave us. We've lost that team teaching setup a number of years ago.
Okay.
And I miss that because that was so helpful. I mean, if when there was a kid that was struggling, we could pull that kid in with the teachers and work out a plan for that kid with that kid's input. And it was awesome. And I miss that part, but that was another watershed moment for me as a teacher, and learning how to work with and depend on other teachers and gain from them, from all their different perspectives and all of their different backgrounds. And that was, again, so helpful
Yeah,
because
because each one of us knew a different side of the kid,
Mhm.
and each one of us came from different walks of life, you
Yep,
know.
different backgrounds, different experiences. We all
Yep.
brought it in, and it was great because we covered so much together as a team, so
Yeah.
much more than you can do as an individual. And I
That's
miss
so.
that.
I remember a time when was that the year that Ken Jackson was the science teacher?
That
When
was our second year.
it was the second year. Okay.
Yeah, Hillary was our science teacher the first year.
Okay. I remember when Ken Jackson, if you're listening, Ken, I love you for all that you taught me. That man had a lot of wisdom, a lot of
He,
life wisdom,
he still does.
and the nicest. Is he still there?
No, he's not there. But he
Oh,
still
okay. I was getting.
he still taps in. He still taps in and messages us through Facebook. He'll make comments and so forth.
Yeah, yeah,
But he's still around.
yeah. If you're watching this, Ken, you may remember this, but I remember there was something, there was some kind of event going on, and it was going to cut into my math time. And during those first few years of teaching at a public middle school, I was very much, very much got to
Mhm.
get this done. After you've been teaching 10, 15 years, you hear free day and you're like, yes,
And you're more flexible because you know how to
right,
adjust.
right. But when you're first teaching, it's like, I got to get through this. I got to get through this. And I remember Ken just pulling me up one day and he said, look, math ain't everything. Okay? Math is not
Yeah.
everything. They'll live. And, there are other aspects of life.
Hmm.
Understand that. And I was like, whoa, yes, I'll never forget that. I'll never forget that because that was something that stuck with me to this day. Like you got to let things flow.
You do.
You gotta be able to be flexible and let things flow and trust the universe, you
Yeah.
know, that
Education is a never-ending, uh, fast-paced, moving, adjusting. No day is the same as the next.
Mhm.
No hour is the same as the next. You're constantly having to adjust, change, uh, move with whatever's being thrown at you last minute. And that's not any different from the first year I started teaching until this year. It's still, you always have to adjust, change, be flexible because things change at the drop of a hat.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, we learned how to teach virtually in like 3 days.
Hmm.
I'd never held a Zoom meeting before. And and then all of a sudden I had to teach classes that way.
Yeah,
I got to be really good at it. It's not my
yeah,
favorite way to teach
yeah,
because I don't think the kids are as that you just don't connect as well
yeah,
as being in person. But yeah, it's a change on in any given moment.
yeah. And speaking of that time, for that when COVID hit,
Yeah.
being the mother of a neurodivergent child,
Hmm.
who was taking classes online, I was very hands-on because there were, you couldn't hold the special ed department to what they were charged to do in this situation. And so I saw when I was online with my daughter during the classes, because I was like, how are they doing this?
Hmm.
But I saw so much growth from when it first started to like, wow, they're getting
Get
more
really good at it.
creative and yeah, and getting really good at it. I
Hmm.
saw a lot of progression. People can say what they want about how terrible that time was, but I saw a lot of growth. And the people who left in droves during COVID, many of them, it was their time to go anyway, you know.
Yeah.
But the ones who stayed and, tackled it, I saw a lot of growth there.
Yeah. We didn't lose teachers. We didn't have teachers leave. We had students leave.
Mm,
Our population dropped.
okay.
Um, by a chunk because, and not because of the teachers or what we were doing, but because the schools were closed, which was not something that we had any control over. I mean,
Mhm.
like we literally we had no idea. They told us, we found out when we first closed, we found out on the news with everybody else that we were closing for, it was supposed to be like 3 weeks.
Mhm.
And like they didn't make an announcement to teachers ahead of time. It just, we were watching the evening news and we find out that we're closed the next day. And that was it.
Wow.
They gave us, then we got an email that came out and they gave us, they broke us into groups, small groups to come into the building and we could pick up stuff from our rooms. But we had like a half hour to go in, get whatever. Do you know how much stuff I have? It's 26 years
Yeah.
now. I've moved rooms multiple times, so I've weeded out somewhat. Do you know how much stuff I had? Couldn't possibly get it all. So yeah, I went in with a couple of grocery bags and packed up as much as I could get that I thought might help teaching virtually. But again, I'd never taught virtually, so I didn't know what I needed. But yeah, that
Yeah.
was quite an experience.
Yeah.
Another watershed
Well,
moment.
it showed, yeah, and it showed that we are able to pivot. We are able to
Mhm.
be creative in how we, deliver the
Yeah.
curriculum. Um, so anyway, that's a separate podcast interview. We have a couple that we can revisit.
Yes. New topics.
All right, number 5. You're a Civil War buff and a history lover.
Hmm.
And I know that you and your family explore state parks every summer. You're going this summer.
As
Yeah,
well as
right?
national parks.
National parks. Yes.
Yep.
How do you integrate your passion for history into your teaching? Um, and what do you hope your students learn about the importance of understanding our past?
Um, I share anything and everything that I come across in my travels. If it applies to what I'm teaching, like when I was in North Carolina, um, just on vacation, we were by some cotton fields. I actually got some cotton and brought it back. So when I taught about the Civil War era and we were taught, I literally could pass cotton around and they could see. We talked about um, slavery and the connection to growing cotton and the cotton gin and how that actually increased the need for slaves as opposed to decreasing. And they could feel the seeds in the cotton and how difficult it would be to take. So it made it hands on. I had hardtack when I taught about the Revolutionary period. I didn't actually make them eat it because it's just beyond, they'd break teeth. but they could like bang it on the desk because it will not break. It's that hard. But it gives them that hands-on piece. Images, pictures, stories. Whenever we talk about different things, when I taught world history, I traveled to Africa back when I was in graduate school, and I have photographs that I would use. Um, I still have a picture of myself on the equator. So even when I'm talking about, we're teaching the kids geography and basic longitude, latitude. We talk about the equator, and there's a picture of Miss Crow on the equator. It's not really there. It's not a line. It's not really a line, but it's there, and you can see that. I've shared my own personal family history with them, and we talked about that. I've got some pretty cool family history on my dad's side. You can actually go to Salem, Massachusetts. My family lived there during the Salem witch trials, and the Gedney house is still standing there. And
I
that
went
is
there.
my
I went there.
that's my dad's family, is
Wow.
the Gedney family. And
Mhm.
there were I'm descended from Elazar Gedney. He was a shipbuilder, but his brother, the family itself were Quakers, but his brother converted to uh, oh my gosh, I'm gonna blank on the name right now. That's not good. Converted so that he could become part of the government in Salem, and he actually was one of the uh, judges during the witch trials. I'm
Wow.
not descended from him, but I'm also
Wow.
descended from a man that signed the Declaration of Independence.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of history there that's for me is really cool. You know, my grandfather fought in World War One. I have a great uncle that fought in World War II and some others, and my family keeps everything. So I have um, books. I have a scrapbook that my great uncle kept during World War II and the times after. I have trench art that he made out of shell casings, and I bring that stuff into school. I let the kids touch it. I let them, look at it. I have an old foot warmer from the 1800s. I have a geography book from 12 years after the United States started as a country. And I let them, now for the book, they do, I make it an experience. So I have little white gloves that they put on before they touch things. It's just like if you were in a museum. Um, but these are things that, yeah, I bring in the history that I can bring in so that it's real to them and they can have as much hands-on experience as possible. And I don't tell them what some of the things are. I mean, like the books are pretty self-explanatory, but they have no idea what a foot warmer is. I mean, and generally speaking, when they look at it, a lot of them tell me it's a toaster, microwave, or like a beginning microwave. um, but I mean, and they get the concept that there's heat involved in it, which is cool.
Mhm.
But then, we go in and we talk about the fact that they would take that with them to church because there's only a fire, a small fire, and there's no heat, there's no central heat. And they're like, what? Well, they're there for hours. What do you mean they're there for hours? Church was an all day event. You went to church and you were on Sunday and you were there for hours upon hours upon hours. And if you weren't wealthy, you couldn't sit up by the fire and be warm, because you used to have to pay for your pew. And those things that blows them away.
Mhm.
I have newspapers from the 1940s during World War II. And the cool thing is when they open it up and there's advertisements, the dress that's $1.50. And they're like, what do you mean it's $1.50? It's like they cost 80 some cents to buy this. They're like, no, really? And they get excited about it. And that's what
Yeah.
I like. I like to see the excitement and the interest that it sparks. And they're like,
Yeah.
really? Was it this cheap when you were alive, Miss I'm not that old, guys. I'm just not that old. It was a lot cheaper than it is now, though. And then
Soon
I
they're going to
start
be
sharing. And if there's other adults in the room who are not the same generation as I am, but maybe slightly younger, but then they can put in their experiences and like the economic stuff. When I went to a matinee movie, it was like 250,
right. Right.
and it's like $10 now. And they're like, oh my gosh, really? It was that cheap? Yeah, we spent all summer long. I think I saw Ghostbusters maybe 15 times in the theater because you would just go. If it was a good movie, You went
Yep.
on Monday and then you went on Wednesday and then you'd go on
Yep.
Friday because it was fun.
Yeah. And she,
Yeah, it was cheap entertainment. And we had
I was,
and just getting that personal experience in there too for them is like that's cool. And they think it's very, very cool that that's happens. And then we talk about the fact that yes, things were cheaper, but people made less money too.
Mhm. um, one of the things that I was gonna, two things that I was gonna say. One is, soon they're gonna be looking at that 1940s newspaper and like not even recognize what a newspaper is. I mean,
Mhm.
soon they're gonna be looking at books funny because, everything's digital
Digital.
now. I like to hold my book, I like to
I'm a
hold,
holdout with that too.
but
I do have a tablet and I will read books on my tablet, but given the opportunity and the choice, I want to hold it in my hand and turn the pages.
I remember, it's just time flies. We were talking about this earlier, but I remember Miko asking me what it was like when I had to be on the phone in the old days with the cord.
Uh-huh.
Like, and I had to go back and think about like what it was like because you could only go a certain distance, while you were on the phone. As a matter of fact, I remember when the cell phones came, I remember initially talking in one spot because I was just so used to not being able to,
To
so it was
move.
such a feeling of freedom to be able to go to different rooms
Mhm.
and talk, but it just seemed so surreal to be having that conversation with my daughter about the old days and her looking at me like, wow. And then you had to push buttons, or did you have to
Uh-huh.
stick your finger in
Dial.
and right?
It we had rotary phones at my house, and the fact that you couldn't talk anywhere that was private
Mhm.
because the phone was in the kitchen or the upstairs hallway. That's where we had phones. So and the kitchen was the hub of our house. Everything happened in and around the kitchen. So if you were on the phone in the kitchen, everybody was hearing your conversation. Now I will say one of the things I learned from my mother, and I use it with my children as well. My mom did not mind being the bad guy, and I don't, as a mother, mind being the bad guy. So there are times where I've told my kids if somebody's asking you to do something that you're not comfortable doing or you just don't want to do, it's okay to, hey, mom, can I do this? And I'm more than happy to be the bad guy and say, no, I'm sorry, you can't do that. And my mom would do that for us.
Mhm.
And that was something that she really instilled in us that it was her job to be the bad guy where so we didn't have to uh, run into issues with our friends if we were being put in a situation that we weren't comfortable with or if we were just I can't people today. It's what my daughter calls it. I just can't people today. And that's okay. In our household, it's perfectly okay to have those days where you just can't people.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, and your friends want you to people and you just can't, I'm very fine being that person that says, sorry, they can't do that. And that was that's my favorite phone story. That and my sister and I sound so much alike on the phone, even back when we were kids. Her boyfriends never knew who they were talking to.
I used to play.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, because we literally sound almost identical on the phone. My mom could tell us apart. My dad was never quite sure. He also didn't like to talk on the phone, so there was that too. But my mom was one of the few people that could right off the bat tell who they were talking to.
Well, thanks for sharing that. Um, the other thing that I wanted to mention that I thought about as you were talking about what you do to bring the passion for
Mhm.
history into the classroom was that, people may think, who are viewing this may think that, that's what you got to do in middle school to keep those classrooms alive. But you also need to do it in high school as
Mhm.
well. So for someone who has spent many years in high school and doing equity work in which I speak with kids, high school kids who talk to me about their experiences, you know, in the school, um, people have a tendency to think that it's all about creating DEI, it's all about creating this sense of belonging. And much of it is, much of it
Mhm.
is. But there's, I would say, almost an equal focus on curriculum and pedagogy um, from the kids who are saying that we want more when it comes to history, learning about history. We want more than timelines and dates that we have to memorize to get tested on. We want different perspectives. We want to hear from all sides. We want the stories. We want you to bring that curriculum to life, you know, um, so we can get a greater um, knowledge of that time period as opposed to just surface learning and spitting out dates. And so I'm not saying that that is happening all over in high school, but not enough of bringing those different perspectives um, and the different lens into the classroom um, to help people, get a better understanding because we're preparing them to be global citizens. And so when they get out there in the real world, we want them to have as much of an opportunity, as much broad knowledge as we can to help prepare them. And so it's not just a middle school thing to do these things. These high school students really love it and appreciate
Yeah.
it
Yeah,
and respect.
it history is a story. It really is. It's a story. It has different characters, it has different events that are happening, but it happens chronologically, just like a story does. And that's how I always used to teach it. It's this is a story, but it's your history.
Mhm.
So if it's your history, it needs to include you, whoever you happen to be.
Mhm.
And that's it. And you're right. It shouldn't it should be taught that way in elementary school. It should be taught that way in middle school. It should be taught that way in high school. It should be taught that way in college.
Mhm.
You know, my oldest is in college and she's struggling through a history class right now. I would love to say that both of my children are history class lovers. They are not. Um, it's not that they don't like history. They just don't always like how it's taught. And
Right.
interestingly enough, they've both told me that their middle school history teachers were the best history teachers that they've had.
Mhm.
And that then they get to high school and it gets boring again.
Mhm.
And that's the terminology they use. It gets boring,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
because history is, it's there are so many interesting, cool things that have happened in history. And it's hard. I will admit, they give us this broad scope that we're supposed to cover in a short time frame. So, you don't get to get real in depth with a lot of things.
Mhm. But delivery is key.
It is. It's huge.
Mhm.
How you present it. Well, I mean, that again, that applies to every class that anybody teaches. Delivery is key for math. Delivery is
Mhm.
key for English. Delivery is key for phys ed. Because if you're not making that connection with the kid, it doesn't matter what you teach.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And they don't want to be there.
Uh, now, some of them do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've met quite a few that do. Some of them, actually, some of the students that we taught, at least one of them is now teaching himself.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I've
Okay.
actually gotten to the point where I'm starting to see the children of some of the students that I taught
Mhm.
originally.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think
If
last
you
year.
can make it, if you can make a connection, it's beautiful. But if you can't
Yeah.
make a connection, um,
Hmm.
it's, you know, they don't want to be there. I've seen people who
Yeah.
are in sports and love the sports, but if they don't like the coach,
Hmm.
or you know, they'll choose a different sport, which is sad, but it happens.
It does.
Um, okay, last question.
Okay.
Kathy, if you had the opportunity to share advice with one or all of the following groups, I'm going to make it easier for you.
Thank you.
Either to students, parents, Department of Education, American people, or aspiring teachers, who would you choose and what would you say?
I'm going to choose all of them as
Oh,
a
okay.
mass group. Um, and I'm going to say it's not all about the grades. It really doesn't matter how many A's that you have. It's about the learning and the growth. Um, there are so many parents these days and so many students these days who are so focused, even teachers who are so focused on getting the A that they've lost the learning. And it's it's very nice if you have A's, but you can be very successful with B's. You can graduate with C's. The letter grade really does not matter. What matters is, are you learning? Are you progressing? Are you accessing the curriculum? Are you able to take that information and apply it? That's what matters. And I kind of wish that we didn't have to grade people because they are so focused on getting an A that they stress themselves out. They nitpick every little thing. Like, but why did you take that point? And explain it's okay that you lost a point. This is why. I want you to learn that you need to do this. You need to learn how to study. Studying is a skill. It's something you can practice. You can get better at it. And what I do to study and works for me may not work for you because you're a different person. And there are different ways that people can study. And I can show you different methods, but you need to try them out and see what works for you. And maybe all the methods that I give you don't work, but that doesn't mean there isn't something out there that will. You know, if you write something for me, and like we're running into kids that are using AI to write uh, different things, different papers that they have to write for classes. We have DBQs or document-based questions where they're writing an essay based on analyzing different sources and then answering a question based on those sources and providing evidence and so forth. I don't want to know if you can use AI, and I can tell if you've used it just by reading it. Because I know after 26 years, I know what a middle schooler can produce writing wise. I want to see you be able to demonstrate that skill of writing and conveying clear thoughts on paper. Or if you can't, if we discussed before, if the writing itself is a block for you, using that speech to text to convey that clear thought, because that's something you're going to need. And it doesn't matter what you decide to do in life, being able to write clearly is a skill that everybody needs. Being able to read something and understand what it is that you're reading it's a skill that everybody needs. But yeah, it's not all about the A, would be my message.
Mhm. And I want to backtrack to, because one of the groups you're talking to is teachers.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in public school now, I've been away from public school for many years now, but in public school, are teachers' class averages taken into consideration for their evaluation?
Their class averages are not. However, if you have too many D's or E's, you can get called in and basically asked why and what have you done in order to make that not so much of a thing. It's kind of an unwritten expectation that not that you they don't want you to give grades the kids really don't earn, but they want you to make sure that you have done absolutely everything that you can to make sure that all of the kids are being successful.
Yeah, I mean,
Which
because if they're all
in this,
failing, then it's you, it's not
yeah,
them.
if they're and
So,
that is
yeah.
most definitely. Um, but the other aspect of that is they keep cutting teachers, they keep cutting resources and so forth, but that expectation doesn't change.
Mhm.
So, I mean, that is a stressor for teachers. But for a lot of new teachers coming in, they get very stressed out
Yeah.
when kids are not being successful in their class.
Yeah.
And what success looks like for a lot of people these days is not a C. I mean, I've had kids literally tell me that my parents tell me a C is failing.
Mhm.
And that's not what that is. A C is average. That's where the majority of the class should fall,
Mhm.
is
Average, right.
in average,
Right.
because that's the whole concept of average, is that above average is a smaller percentage, below average is a smaller percentage, and average is where the majority of people would fall statistically. Um, but again, that's another. I'm not a big fan of letter grades for that reason as well. Because that means you're looking at everybody, not you're not looking at a student's progress. This is this child at the beginning of the class, this child at the middle of the year, this child at the end of the year, and seeing the progress in that individual child. You're not comparing the child to themselves. You're comparing the child to other people.
Mm.
And everybody that walks in there is coming in with others. Everybody brings in their own experiences their own, nobody has the same thing walking in. So some kids are just going to be more ahead simply because of where they started and the supports they have outside of the school, where other kids are going to be behind because of where they started and the lack of supports they have outside of school. So, is it fair or equitable to compare them?
You would love this book. I have it somewhere. I was looking for it, but I'm not in my, I'm not where my books are, but it's called
Mm-hmm.
Grading for Equity. You would love, you would love that
I,
book. So you should put that on your
I
list.
added to my reading list.
Yes. Or I'll send it to you. You just
Okay.
got to give
Yeah.
it.
Just, yeah.
I love that
Just
book. But then
message me the title because I'm not going to remember. I mean, we're
Grading
getting to
for
the
Equity.
point where
Yes.
you know me, I'm more of a morning person. We're getting close to bedtime
Yes.
here.
Yeah. We went long, but that was our last
That's okay.
question. And I appreciate your responses, your honest responses. You always are. We always have great conversations anytime we talk.
I
And
do enjoy that.
we've come up with a lot of different, topics that we can continue our conversation in another podcast episode.
Yeah.
So I hope you're open to that.
I am most definitely. I have enjoyed this. I love talking to you anytime.
Yeah.
So that would be fine.
Okay. Give Brendan and Sarah and Anna, your sister, your family, my love. And thank you
I'm
so much for
definitely.
taking time, on a school night
Well,
to,
it's spring break, so
oh, it's spring break for
I
you.
I did
Okay.
this on purpose, knowing I would not have to get up the next morning.
That's right. You'd be in bed by now.
Yes,
But
I would.
thank you. And for the listeners, thanks for tuning in. Love and light to you, and see you on the next podcast episode. Have a good night. Thank you, Kathy.